Welcome back, guys, to Read Horror Storytelling. Today, I'm bringing you a true horror story, and I hope you enjoy it. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Thank you so much, and now, let's dive into the true story.
When I was very young, my family felt like a single leaf, drifting along an endless current, never settling in one place long enough to call it truly home. By the time I turned 8, we finally put down some roots in Silver Shore, Delaware, and that town became the one place I could claim as my own, at least until I headed off to university in Boulder, Colorado. Still, most of my earliest recollections revolve around that stretch in Silver Shore, though flickers of memory emerge from the various rentals and temporary homes we occupied before then, chasing imagined ghosts through a dilapidated farmhouse in rural Virginia, building mud forts in the red clay fields of Georgia, and scavenging driftwood on the banks of a small creek behind a rented duplex in West Virginia. Those episodes blur into a jumble of half-formed ideas, until one chapter from my 5th year of life stands in sharp relief, as clear as a photograph freshly developed in a dark room. Even now, whenever I linger in thought, I can't tell if those experiences were vivid dreams, conjured by a fever, or something more tangible, a fleeting intrusion of another world. Deep in my heart, though, I believe they truly happened. The house in question sat on the fringe of a tiny town called Maplevale, Ohio. Population 709, tucked away among rolling hills and dense, whispering pines. My parents had rented it at the beginning of spring because it was the only place available within an hour's commute of my father's new job at a manufacturing plant farther south. By contrast with our small family of 3, the house was enormous. 2 stories, tall windows framed by dark green shutters, wide creaking porches both at the front and back, and a 2nd-floor balcony that overlooked the dense treetops. In my childish mind, it felt as if we had leased half a castle. There were rooms I never saw, doors I never dared open, hallways that seemed to stretch on for miles. Portions of the upstairs were locked off, inaccessible, their keys nowhere to be found. But I never questioned why. I simply accepted there were corners of that house humans weren't supposed to see. A week after my 5th birthday, my parents had celebrated it in our crowded little kitchen, with only my mother's special sugar cookies and a modest stack of presents. Sickness struck me like lightning. What began as a dull weariness blossomed overnight into a raging fever. The local doctor delivered the verdict. I had mononucleosis. That meant 3 weeks at least of enforced stillness. No running or roughhousing, just lying in one place until the illness ran its course. It was terrible timing. We were in the thick of packing for yet another move, this time to a small town in eastern Ohio. Most of my things had already been stowed in cardboard boxes. My beloved wooden train tracks, the battered stuffed rabbit my grandmother had given me at birth, countless picture books that lined the low shelves in my room. Now, my bed felt like a barren island amid a sea of boxes. My mother became my sole lifeline, bringing me icy ginger-infused soda and a rotating supply of storybooks to stave off boredom. Even with those comforts, boredom loomed relentlessly, ready to swallow me whole on any given afternoon. I don't remember exactly how it began, whether it was the 3rd or 4th day of being cooped up under stiff white sheets, but something shifted in the hush of that empty room when no one else was around. My first clear recollection was noticing a small figure perched atop a stack of my picture books on the bedside table. He must have been sitting quietly there for hours, immersed in a picture of a lion standing on its hind legs. At first, I thought he was a trick of my fevered mind, an overactive imagination at work. But when I blinked twice, he was still there, staring at the illustration with wide, unblinking eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Longjaw. That name seemed to bubble out of thin air, but he explained that his mouth was very large, wider than anything else on his small body. Everything about him was slightly out of proportion. His head was too big for his torso, his eyes took up half his face, and his ears stuck out at odd angles like twin radar dishes. Yet of all his oddities, his mouth was the most pronounced, a broad, crescent-shaped grin that stretched nearly from ear to ear, revealing rows of tiny, perfectly even teeth. In that moment, he turned to me and asked, "Does that name suit me?" And I, half in disbelief, whispered back, "Yes, that seems right." He set off from the stack of books and hopped to the edge of my bed, peering at the barren room with what I took to be curiosity. I asked him how he arrived, and he said he had been there even before I noticed him, watching me through the window every day as I lay in bed. He said he liked my books, so many stories, so many words and pictures, and he learned how to read by studying them when I slept. He never came out when my mother visited. Instead, he said, "I hide under your bed. She must never see me, or she will not let us talk anymore." And so our secret friendship began. In the hush of a bedroom where cardboard boxes crowded the corners, and the air hung heavy with disinfectant and the scent of pine from the forest beyond. At first, he simply mirrored my actions. If I picked up a book to read aloud, he would hover near my feet, leaning in to watch every word. He never spoke while I read, but occasionally I would glance at him and see his mouth shaped as though he was reading along with me. The sight of that enormous, smiling mouth among the stacks of dusty encyclopedias was both comforting and unsettling. On the third morning after I discovered Mr. Longjaw, though, he appeared as I was glancing out the window. He tugged gently at the hem of my pajamas. "I have a new game," he said, roughly in tune with the rhymes and rhythms of the stories he must have devoured from my books. "But we have to wait for your mother to leave first." I told him that I shouldn't leave my bed, that my parents would scold me. But he waved those warnings away. "It is a small detour, a secret just between us," he insisted. When my mother arrived with another tray of books and soda at midday, he disappeared instantly, slipping under the bed as though he were made of smoke. As soon as her footsteps faded down the hallway, Mr. Longjaw poked his head out and beckoned me to follow. "Come," he whispered. "We go to the room at the end of the hall." I tried to object, worried that I'd get in trouble, but he was persistent. I imagined the stern look on my mother's face, but excitement overcame my fear. I slipped out of bed and followed him down the dim corridor. That room at the end of the hall was a stripped-down space. No furniture, no patterned wallpaper, just gray plaster walls and a single window. Pale light filtered in, illuminating a floor covered in a thin layer of sawdust. There was something empty and hollow about it, as if it existed only in the margins of the house's story. Mr. Longjaw moved straight to the window, reached up, and slid it open without making a sound. The view was dizzying, 2 stories above the ground on a steep incline, the drop almost twice as deep as it seemed from the first floor porch. From this vantage, the forest floor looked like a quilt of emerald and chestnut, punctuated by tufts of wild flowers. "Look down," Mr. Longjaw urged. My heart thudded in my chest as I peered over the edge. I like to pretend there is a cushion of unseen air, soft like clouds, waiting below. If I jump and believe hard enough, I'll bounce back up like a leaf floating on the wind. He turned to me, grinning that wide grin. "I want you to try it." I clenched the windowsill, reluctance knotting my stomach. But it's so far down, I could get hurt. My voice trembled like a small bird's wings. "Fun is always accompanied by risk," he whispered, his eyes gleaming. "Besides, you are safe. You just have to believe." He offered me a hand, but I shook my head, stepping back. Fear won out, and I returned to my bed, leaving Mr. Longjaw's promise of flight dangling in midair. He watched me for a moment, his expression flickering from impatience to disappointment, then waved me off and retreated under the bed in silence. The next day, when the first light of dawn still lingered pale on the horizon, Mr. Longjaw appeared at the foot of my bed, holding a small wooden box in his shaking hands. "I have brought you something to learn a special skill," he said, opening the lid to reveal its contents. My eyes sharpened as soon as I saw what was inside. A set of gleaming metal objects, slender and sharp. I recoiled. "Knives!" I hissed, suddenly aware that, in my mother's eyes, these were the very last things a sick child should handle. "My parents will be furious if they see those in my room. I could get into so much trouble. Juggling will make you nimble and graceful," Mr. Longjaw said, his voice soft but insistent. "These are perfect for practice. See how they balance." He lifted one of the knives and spun it lightly between his fingers. The blade caught the morning light, sending a glint across the bland walls. I shook my head, pressing my back against the headboard. "I can't. I'm not old enough. And those are dangerous." His dark, bulbous eyes narrowed as his lips tightened into a firm line. He tucked the box against his side, a single frown creasing the smooth curve of his brow. Then he ducked under the bed and stayed there the rest of the day, silent as dusk. I tried to ignore him, closing my eyes and sinking into slow dreams. But whenever I drifted towards sleep, I felt his gaze at the foot of my bed, urging me to rise and play. Nightmares began too, vivid images of him standing at the window overlooking that daunting drop, urging me to leap. "Trampoline," he would call, though no trampoline existed. Sometimes he was there until the first tinge of pink dawn, whispering, "Just one jump, see what happens." But I clung to the safety of the mattress, refusing to move. After 2 weeks of confinement, my mother announced that I was strong enough to go outside for a while, that fresh air and sunshine would do me good. Elated, I put on my sneakers, scuffed and dusty from lack of use, and bounded out onto the back porch, where the warm sun greeted me like an old friend. For a moment, I forgot about my fever, about the knives, about the trickster spirit who haunted my room. I inhaled the scent of pine and damp earth, relishing the way the breeze played through the leaves. But there he was, waiting for me near the edge of the porch, as if he'd been born in the twilight world, just beyond our threshold. "There's something I want to show you," he said, leaning close so I could feel his breath, cold and faintly woodsy. He led me to the forest trail behind the house, a narrow, winding path trodden smooth by deer and small woodland creatures. "This is a special path," he explained. his voice low, conspiratorial. "I have brought many friends, children about your age, down this way. When they were ready, I took them to a place where wonders happen, where no one else can follow. You're not ready yet, but one day when your time comes, we will go there together." My heart pounded. The idea of a hidden realm pulsed through me with a strange delight. I followed him to the edge of the trees, glanced back at the house, and imagined a world beyond the pines where magic was real. But I turned away without asking him more, not yet ready to tiptoe over that threshold. A few days later, the moving truck arrived. I climbed into the passenger seat beside my father before dawn, bundled in my favorite hoodie, squinting against the headlights as they packed the last of our things. I thought about telling Mr. Longjaw that I was leaving, that I would be snatched away forever. But something told me he would not say goodbye. He would simply watch me go and plot our next meeting in secret. So I remained silent, letting the engine's hum lull me toward a drowsy half-consciousness. My father rumbled down the narrow gravel drive, the headlights illuminating the dark outline of our rented home one last time. From the second-story window, I saw Mr. Longjaw's silhouette standing motionless, clutching a blade that reflected the light like a tiny star. He remained there until our truck crested the first hill, his small hand lifting in a feeble wave that dissolved into the shadows. I did not wave back. Years passed. I recovered from my illness, grew tall and lean, and eventually headed west for college, leaving childhood dreams and ghosts behind. But nothing could erase the memory of that enormous-mouthed creature, or the hush of that empty room at the end of the hall. In spring of my 20th year, driven by a mixture of nostalgia and the need for closure, I returned to Maplevale. The property where the house once stood was empty now, reduced to a stone foundation overgrown with ivy and moss. Rumor was that it had burned down 2 springs after we left, though few locals remembered exactly why or how. The place felt as though it had been swallowed by time, leaving no record that a young boy once lay feverish on a bed, befriended by a creature whose name echoed through dreams. With a mix of apprehension and curiosity, I followed the deer trail Mr. Longjaw had shown me all those years ago. Trees leaned together overhead, forming a tunnel of emerald light. I heard no rustling of animal life, only the faint creak of branches swaying in a gentle breeze. I walked for what felt like an hour, turning over each memory in my mind. The taste of ginger soda, the hush of the hallway at midnight, the glimmer of steel blades in the dim light. My feet crunched on fallen needles, and the air smelled of earth and new growth. At last, the path opened onto a clearing bathed in soft sunlight. In its center stood a small burial ground, neatly arranged headstones, each exquisitely carved with simple names and dates, children's names. Some that might have been my peers, others that predated me by decades. Many of the markers bore nearly identical dates of passing, their ages all hovering around 5 or 6 years old. My breath caught as I walked among them, reading inscriptions like Alyssa May, beloved daughter, 1958-1963, and Joshua Reed, gentle soul, 1959-1964. The list went on. Emily Grace, Daniel Paul, and so many more. Each stone seemed to echo a story cut painfully short, a life that had ended while the world around them continued to turn. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized where I was standing. Mr. Longjaw's special place was this children's, cemetery, a final resting ground for others who had, like me, glimpsed his world. I sank to my knees by the oldest marker I could find, a small, worn stone marked simply Sarah J. Thompson, 1957-1962. My chest tightened. Had Sarah been one of his friends? Had she, like me, felt tempted to jump from a high window onto an invisible cushion of air? I traced the letters with a trembling finger, half expecting to feel warmth or movement, but the stone was cold beneath my palm. Tears pooled in my eyes, not just for Sarah, but for every child whose life had intersected with that strange creature in the shadows. I closed my eyes and thought I heard a faint, distant chuckle, something between a whisper and the rustle of leaves. My heart thumped wildly. "Mr. Longjaw," I called out, voice cracking. The forest remained silent, and the only reply was the song of birds and the gentle sigh of the wind. I rose and walked the perimeter of the cemetery, reading each name and date. The ages never climbed beyond single digits. No teenagers, no adults. Only small children whose time had ended when their birthday candles were still flickering. A sense of sorrow deepened inside me, mingled with guilt and confusion. Had any of them really believed in the trampoline of air, that leap of faith Mr. Longjaw promised? Or were they drawn down that path by his promises of grandeur and escape? I left as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the headstones, and felt as if I were walking out of a dream that had never truly been mine. My reflection in the rearview mirror on the drive away seemed older, wearier, as though I carried the weight of every life lost in that clearing. In the months that followed, I grappled with what I had seen. I spoke to no one about it, not even my parents. In their minds, I was a sick little boy who got better, then moved on. They had no way of knowing that behind the walls of that silent house, I had met something that existed between reality and nightmare. A being who fed on childhood innocence and left sorrow in his wake. Years later, I became a storyteller of sorts, an author of eerie tales that echoed that spring in Maplevale. People praised my imagination, my knack for conjuring worlds drenched in shadow. But each time I penned the words, each time I crafted a description of a creature lurking in a child's room, I felt a pang of guilt, a reminder that I wasn't creating from nothing. I was merely recounting fragments of a truth no one else would believe. In quiet hours, I sometimes wander back to those memories, wondering what became of that empty house, of the trail of children who vanished into its forest. I imagine their spirits in the hush of nighttime woods, whispering warnings I may have ignored. On a recent winter night, I dreamt I heard my own voice calling my name from the base of that hill. I woke to find snow settling outside my window, each flake drifting like a silent messenger, and for a moment, I thought I saw a small, hunched figure standing under a bare-branched oak across the street, its mouth wide in a grin, waiting for me to remember. I know now that I can never fully escape Mr. Longjaw's influence. That part of me will forever be tethered to a frozen adrenaline rush, to the sickly sweet feel of ginger soda, and to the echo of tiny wind-swept laughter on a gravestone under a pale Ohio sun.